once again, everybody, if you've been with us before, welcome back. This is Ask Maggie. You get a chance to talk to me directly, get your questions in. If you haven't joined us, welcome. We're super excited to, bring you into our wedding community. And today we are talking about building your wedding vocabulary. There is a million different new terms that come up when you're planning your big day, and we are going to tackle those terms today. So again, I have my friend Laura with us from David's Bridal. And she's got all your questions, but feel free to keep adding those questions in there so we get all your questions answered.
I'm excited.
All right, I'll say, yeah, it's 1:31. Let's get going.
All right, cool. So like you said, we are covering building your wedding vocabulary. So there's so many terms out there, lots to learn about. Can be daunting, but fear not, that's what you're here for. So let's start with the reception. That's such a big part of a couple's event. So let's start very high level. What's a cake cutting?
Okay, yeah, so good point. Let's start at the reception because it really takes up the bulk of your wedding day. So a cake cutting, you'll hear this question come up when you go to visit the venue or you're talking with your caterer, and they'll say, so now, this part in the evening, you'd have your cake cutting, and you might actually have a separate cake cutting cake. And that's where the question usually comes up. What does that mean? So a lot of times you have a cake that you're going to cut at the reception, right? It's usually smaller in size. But what is actually served to your guest is a different cake, more of like a large sheet cake that comes out of the kitchen. So a cutting cake is something that you're going to cut that's small in size, but it's not actually intended to feed all the guests at your reception.
Oh, makes sense. And a great photo op too, right?
Absolutely. It's a must have. It should definitely be on your shot list, which is another word we'll cover in a minute, but you definitely want to have it on your shot list.
Love it. How about when you hear an event planner or your venue talk about a room flip? What does that mean?
Okay, so the room flip is if you're in having your ceremony and reception at one place, and this happens a lot when you're at sort of like a large hotel sort of venue. Many times, let's say you'll have your ceremony in one of their grand ballrooms, and then all of your guests will leave and go out for cocktail hour, usually someplace else. And what they're going to do, that term room flip, means they're actually going to flip the room from your ceremony into what the reception, sit down dinner or dinner side of the reception is going to be. So they're going to flip that room from being set up from the ceremony type of setup to the reception type. And they do that, of course, when your guests are out at cocktail hour.
And it's like magic. You've no idea that happened. You're having your cocktails at a cocktail hour, and it's a totally different room when you come back.
That's right. It's a mad scene behind everything where everyone gets it all done, but it really is usually very beautiful and dramatic when you come back into this room and it looks completely different.
Totally different. I love that. Let's talk a little about tablescapes. What does that mean when you're talking about your decor?
Yeah, so that term tablescape has really become part of, like party planning in general. So what it really means is what the table decor is going to look like. Everything from the centerpieces, the florals, to how the table is going to be set and the linens. So the whole tablescape is really what the table itself is going to look like, referring to the decor. So that sort of vocab might come up when you're talking to your florist, probably will come up when you're talking to the venue about decor, but of course could come up in other conversations as well.
And on the topic of tables, can you talk a little bit about the difference between a sweetheart table and a head table?
Yeah, so head table is the traditional table at the, kind of head of the room at the reception, where all of the bridal party would sit, and even sometimes including some of those VIP members that we talk about at the wedding. And then a sweetheart table just refers to a table with two people, meaning usually the couple who just got married. They're going to be able to sit together at a sweetheart table. And it's just kind of eliminating the idea of a head table, which is everyone at the in the bridal party.
Got it. Okay. Let's talk about the bar, the fun stuff here. So can you talk a little bit about an open bar versus a cash bar?
Yeah, so these terms get used all the time. And, sometimes we forget that, like, not everybody knows what that means. So an open bar means that you don't have to pay for anything as a guest. It means that everything that's available to you, right, is there. You don't have to pay for it. And it means that it's part of the catering bill or the bar bill or the venue bill that the couple is dealing with. If you have a cash bar, it really just means that the couple is going to be asking you to pay for either your alcoholic drinks or maybe just some specific drinks. So sometimes we hear cash bar, but what we don't know is that they may be offering certain drinks like wine and beer. And if you wanted anything special or different than that, you'd have to pay for it. Usually these terms will be communicated to you, especially if it's a cash bar somehow through the communication with the couple, whether it's on the RSVP card or something like that.
Okay, thank you. And how about a signature cocktail?
Yeah, as we know, very popular these days. And it really just means that the couple has picked one or two particular drinks that they're going to serve their guest. And it can be something fun. We've talked about margaritas or martinis, things like that. And it's a way for them to cut down on the budget, of course, for what they're serving. But you still have a lot of like fun and festive, feelings around it.
I've seen some really clever signature cocktails that are special to the couple and delicious as well.
Yeah, it's really fun. I think it's a really fun touch.
Yeah, absolutely. How about place cards, escort cards? I've seen escort card like displays. I'm like, can you talk us through the difference between those?
Yeah, so that is a question that, I feel like no matter how many times it's covered or talked about, it still is confusing. So let's talk about the term escort card. So an escort card tells you actually what table you're going to be sitting at, right? So it gets interchanged a lot with place card, but they're two very different things. So the escort card, when you walk into a reception, you usually see has your name on it and will tell you what table you're sitting at. Sometimes a couple will also do a place card, which actually tells you where you're seated at that particular table. So when you got your escort card and it said Maggie Lord, table 3, then I head to table 3. When I got there, if the couple was doing a place card as well, I would have to look around table 3 to see where exactly at the table I'm seated.
Okay. Interesting. And I've seen some really clever couples do some really clever things with their escort cards, whether it's a display or something kind of a keepsake too, that you can get really creative with those types of things.
Of course you can use table numbers, that's fine. But I love it when couples get creative and they name a table either after places that they visited or things that were special to them. So instead of saying, oh, I'm at table 3, you might say, I'm at the Paris table or I'm at the, Los Angeles table. I think that's kind of fun.
Yeah, absolutely. How about the term +1, Maggie?
Yeah, again, these are like words that we feel like, they get tossed around in weddings a lot, but what do they actually mean? We want to make sure everyone knows 100% for sure. So a +1 is going to really have that term that allows you to know that you can bring a guest. So, usually if you're of a certain age, usually it's college or older, right? That's kind of like 21 is kind of that point where a couple would say, okay, we are inviting this person. They are not married. And we're going to allow them to bring a +1, which means a guest. They can bring a guest with them as their date to the actual wedding.
And this would typically happen on the invitation itself, correct?
Yes, we've covered this before, but it's a good point. The way you know if you're going to be able to have a +1 is the key is looking at the wording on the invitation. So it would say Maggie Lord and guest, which would be my indication that I'm allowed to bring a guest. Otherwise, it would just say, inviting Maggie Lord.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you. How about what does fondant mean when you're talking about your wedding cake?
Yeah. So a lot of times wedding cakes, those beautiful ones that we see, that are like so amazing and have so much detail to them, that they have fondant on them, which is like a really heavy sort of sugary frosting. And it's very strong and allows those beautiful cakes to be built the way that they are. So a lot of times it can add up. They can be expensive. So I often have seen couples who will go ahead and have that sort of smaller cake with the fondant and all the beautiful details. But what they actually serve is a cake that's like really yummy and tasty, not as expensive, that can feed all their guests, especially if they're having a 150, 200, 250 person reception.
And how about that, the tradition of saving your cake topper? Does that come from your cake that your kind of display cake?
Yeah. So good point. So a lot of couples, like they'll have a cake topper and that is definitely a keepsake. But one of the really fun traditions is that they would say you would keep a piece of the cake and you would eat it on your first anniversary. So you would freeze it for the whole year and you would eat it. I do think probably couples still do this. I'm not sure if they're actually eating it as much or as if they're just taking it out on their first wedding anniversary as a way to celebrate. But to your point about cake toppers, right? That's usually some sort of cute symbol, or they've put together some sort of really fun representation of who they are as a couple. I mean, I've seen everything from really beautiful monograms to people having cute little pictures of like their dog or things like that. So I encourage you to get really creative with your cake topper, and you definitely want to take it off and make sure it goes home with you after the reception.
And it's another way to just kind of make it personal to you and your spouse, throughout, just another personal element to your wedding.
Absolutely. Get as creative as you can with that kind of fun stuff.
I think I might pass on the year-long frozen cake. Emily, did you eat yours, Maggie?
I remember saving it, and I remember taking it out a year later, and it did not look very delicious. So we kind of just were like, oh, well, we did do it. We did the tradition.
We had a glass of champagne instead.
Exactly.
Awesome. Okay, so how about when your event planner or your venue says something along the lines of cost per person? What would that mean?
Yeah, so I just want to remind, we got a lot of new people jumping on, which is great. We're covering wedding vocabulary today. So all those kind of tricky new words that only come up in wedding planning. So Laura said, what is cost per person? And this is the way that generally like a wedding planner or the catering or the venue company would articulate to you what it's going to cost per each person that you have. And usually it's all encompassing. It means with the food, the bar, and all these other things. And it's really your rough number to work off with your budget. And then vice versa, you also early on in the planning phase can start budgeting if you have a rough idea of what it might cost you per person, because it's really going to give that indication of, am I going to have 250 people or am I going to have 70 people, based on the fact that it could be $150 a person for the wedding. So it's a budgeting tool.
Got it. Okay, very helpful. How about towards the end of the reception and you hear terms like a send-off? What would that mean?
Yeah, a send-off is the way that the couple is going to exit the reception. It's usually like the final moments. Of course, it's captured, through the photos. And there's a lot of creative ways to do this. So I've seen sparklers, I've seen rose petals, I've seen the ribbon wands, right? I've seen I've seen confetti, right? Like really fun ways. But it generally means that you're going to get most of your guests to come out from the reception. And as you as a couple leave, and it's kind of your send off to say goodnight to the big day is over, everyone from your reception is there to send you off in style.
Wow. And it's, again, such a great photo moment too.
It is. I love them. They're one of my favorite photos actually to look at when I look at real weddings.
They're beautiful. Anything else on the reception front, Maggie, that you think would be important to cover? I know we've kind of covered a lot of elements of the reception, but anything else come to mind?
I think it's really about making sure that, you've communicated with vendors too. Like we will say a vendor timeline that could be different than your timeline with your bridesmaids. Make sure that the vendors have a timeline for the day, what time they're supposed to be there, how long are they supposed to be there for. So that's super important. So though, it's really putting on a huge event like this, it's not easy. So I would say that you definitely want to make sure that you have a timeline for your vendors as well as for yourself.
And on that note too, can you speak a little bit about the difference between a wedding planner and a day of coordinator?
Yeah, this is a question that comes up a lot. So a wedding planner is going to be someone who helps you plan through the entire planning process. Usually starts with you early on, helps you craft your vision, and all those sort of things. And then a coordinator is someone who comes in maybe 1 month before, sometimes 2 or 3 weeks before, and just helps things run smoothly. And of course, a day of coordinator is going to be there the whole day to make sure that your day actually runs as smooth as possible.
Excellent. And so important to alleviate some of the stress off the couple too, I'm sure.
100%.
Okay, I'm going to pop over to the ceremony. So we know a wedding ceremony can take many different shapes. Everyone does it differently and makes it personal to them. But I do think there are some terms that are kind of universal that we could cover here. So can you talk a little bit about maybe a processional versus recessional when it comes to your ceremony?
Yeah, so that term really refers to the ceremony, and what it does is processional is when everyone is walking down the aisle. So the processional will start, whether it starts with the groom, sometimes the groomsmen, the bridesmaids come in, the flower girls, the ring bearers, all those cute little great people in your bridal party. And then the recessional is the opposite. It's when everyone is leaving after you've said I do and the ceremony is over. So this term really comes up a lot when people ask about what sort of music you might want for your recessional. You're going to pick something really fun. Sometimes people go traditional, but that's when those terms pop up a lot. So it's important to know what they are.
And how about when it comes to your processional and recessional, does order matter, or can that be something a couple can kind of customize to their ceremony?
That can definitely be customized. I think it's kind of fun when people do things a little different, right? What works for them. Sometimes they have groomsmen walk up the aisle. Other times they come in and they're just standing up there. So it's definitely one of those areas that you can be as traditional as you want to be, but you certainly can shake it up and make it super fun.
I love that. A term that I think became really popular over the past couple of years, especially as we experienced COVID, was micro wedding. Maggie, what does micro wedding mean?
Yes, that term just blew up obviously during COVID, right? Because big celebrations certainly couldn't be happening. So micro weddings are when couples choose to have a very, very small ceremony. So we're talking, I would say the number that we've kind of generally heard is like 30 people and under for a micro ceremony. Sometimes it can even be 15 or 10. To your point, it rose to fame during COVID, but there are couples who now that sort of wedding is kind of out there and we've seen beautiful photographs of those sort of weddings, I think more people are choosing that option.
Yeah, absolutely. It's very intimate and a special way to do your wedding if that's the kind of size ceremony and event you want to have.
Absolutely.
Okay, anything else on the ceremony front, Maggie, that we can cover for our guests?
I guess the only other term is sometimes people forget what an officiant means, right? So if you are getting married in a house of worship, you're going to have someone from that church or that sort of house of worship who's going to actually do the ceremony. But otherwise, an officiant really means someone who's going to oversee the actual ceremony and they're going to actually marry you. So a lot of times couples who are getting married outside or someplace like that, they're going to have to look for an officiant to actually officiate the entire wedding.
And Maggie, on that note too, can you talk a little bit about a marriage license? I know it's super important.
Yeah, super important, and it varies state to state. Some states you have to get a marriage license 3 days before. Some it has to be, there's 5 days before. Sometimes you don't have to wait at all. So definitely do the research about a marriage license, and you are going to have to make sure that it's signed and then it gets witnessed right at your ceremony. And usually the maid of honor and best man will do it. Sometimes you can pick somebody else who's important to you. But the marriage license is a very important piece of making sure that everything actually is formalized and documented and back to the courthouse.
It makes it official.
Yep.
I love it. Well, we just got a great question about an unplugged ceremony. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, an unplugged ceremony, one of my favorite things, by the way, is when the couple asks that everyone at the ceremony put away their phones, all right? So they don't want pictures being taken. They don't want pictures going up on social. They don't want to look around their ceremony and see all these phones out, or also have phones going off with text messages and all these other things. A lot of times couples will put out a sign that says, "Welcome to our wedding. Please respect the fact that we're having an unplugged ceremony." They've paid a lot of money to have a photographer there who's going to document it. They don't need everyone else's phones to come out. So that's an unplugged ceremony. And there's a lot of really nice ways to be able to communicate it to your guests. But I do think it's something that is continuing to trend.
Absolutely. And is that something you would have to communicate ahead of time, or can it be, right as your guests are walking in, or do you have to put it on your save the date or?
Yeah, no, I don't feel like it doesn't have to be communicated too far ahead of time. Most people, you're fine that they have their phone. Of course, they want their phone on them for a variety of reasons. It just means that the actual ceremony, you're asking them to turn them off, put them away, and please don't take photos because you want the photographer to be able to capture the photos.
It makes such a difference too for your photos and even just people being present at your ceremony.
Yes, I can't tell you the amount of wedding photos I've seen where there's someone stepped in the aisle to try to take a picture and the photographer can't get the shot. So respect the couple, put your phone away. You can get it back in 30 minutes.
Absolutely. So let's talk about planning. So a lot goes into planning your event. So Can you talk a little bit about the terms full planning and partial planning when it comes to wedding planners?
Yes. So when it comes to wedding planners, again, this kind of goes back to like coordinator and that sort of thing. And there's a lot of different terms with wedding planners. So a full planner is someone who's going to start with you from the beginning, craft your vision, work with your budget, perhaps even go dress shopping with you. They're going to coordinate every single part of the wedding planning process. And they're going to be really involved in some of the more personal things like the budget. A partial planner is someone who's going to help you contact all your vendors. You're going to contract vendors with them. They might help you tour some of like the venue spaces, but they're not going to be as in detail in the sort of personal things like the budget and other stuff like that.
Okay, interesting. We've talked a lot about photography, such a big part of your wedding, capturing those really special moments. What is a shot list, Maggie?
Yeah, so a shot list refers to something that you're going to give your photographer ahead of time. And it basically is a detailed list of all the images that you would like them to capture from your wedding day, in addition to all of the people, the VIPs, that you want in photos. So it's a good time to like line up, like this is all the family members that we would like to have be part of some of our photos, of course, the bridal party. And then the shot list can go, it can be as detailed as you want or as vague as you want, depending on kind of what relationship you have with your photographer. But it is a really great place so that the photographer knows what to capture. And then on the flip side, you're not disappointed as the bride because you got the photographs that you actually wanted. So give them a shot list, tell them exactly what you want, who you want those pictures with, and you can go from there.
And I'm sure too, you can lean on your photographer a little bit to kind of get some guidance on, they're the experts in that. I'm sure you can lean a little bit.
I say that all the time. It's fantastic if you can lean into your vendors because they do this, often and you don't. So ask them questions, take their advice. They are the professional. So they will be there to help guide you as well.
Amazing. I want to jump back to planners and coordinators just quickly. We got a question about could your wedding planner and wedding coordinator sometimes be the same person, or are they always two different individuals?
That's a good question. So a wedding planner is someone who works with you through the entire process. Many times they will bring in somebody, maybe one person, sometimes an extra person, the day of, who is going to help coordinate, right? So your wedding planner, yes, of course, if it's a smaller sort of event, might actually then on the day of come and help run things smoothly. But many times your event planner plans everything with you there through the whole process. Day of will bring in other people in addition to help to run all the different like details and aspects of the day.
Okay, thank you. How about the term invitation suite? What does that encompass?
Yeah, so a lot of times brides will start to, plan out in their head and their thought process of what their invitation suite is going to look like. So the invitation suite is everything from the save the date to the invitation to the response card. Oftentimes it even includes what the thank you card is going to look like. And when you plan it out in a suite, it just really gives you the opportunity to make sure that there's like common thread through everything, that it's all very coordinated, whether that be the color, the style, if you do a crest at the top or some sort of monogram. So it gives you an overall look at all of those stationary pieces and allows you to kind of really plan it and, order something that is going to be very coordinated with each other.
I love that. And again, that feels like an element in which you can lean on the vendor in which is helping you print your invitations or your invitations.
100%. Yep.
They'll be able to kind of give you guidance. I love that. I just got a great question come through about what's the best way to find a wedding planner, Maggie?
Yeah. So, there's a lot of them, and like every other sort of vendor, you might have to go through a couple until you find the one that works with you. There's different styles, there's different budgets, right? And you have to also see if they are available. So it's no different than trying to look and research and find a couple of venues in your area. You're going to want to look and research some wedding planners. One great way to find one is if you've already started down the path with a venue. They host weddings all the time. So you should ask the venue, do you have any recommendations for either a coordinator or a wedding planner? And that's going to allow them to really be able to, give you some good advice, right? Because they have worked with them in the past. And then you really get to sit down and interview them and talk about what your needs are and what they can bring to the journey for you.
I love that. Can you talk a little bit about wedding insurance, Maggie?
Yeah, so this is a question I get asked a lot in the Diamond loyalty wedding consultations through David's Bridal, which a lot of times brides say, what's the difference between wedding insurance and if a vendor has vendor insurance? So wedding insurance is a policy that you can take out for the day that covers you, if there's an accident, if there's injuries at your ceremony reception. Sometimes they'll have clauses in there if there was a hurricane and everything had to get canceled or rescheduled. So it's a way to kind of cover you for that entire event. Vendor insurance is making sure that your vendor has business insurance, which covers them and allows you to know that you're working with a professional.
Got it. Got it. I was at a wedding recently where the power went out mid ceremony, and that was an instance in which I think insurance really came in handy.
Absolutely.
We made the best of it. Okay, that's awesome. Can you talk a little bit about what the term a palette means when it comes to your wedding colors?
Yeah, so a palette is basically what you're going to do is you're going to look for what sort of wedding colors you want, right? How it like works with your overall theme and everything else. And you're going to bring it all together in one palette, right? And see if it kind of works together. And it might be everything from the overall color theme for the wedding, along with bridesmaids colors, right, along with whatever sort of decor or floral colors you're working with. So it really kind of gives you a 360 view of all the colors that are going to be anywhere through the elements of your wedding. And it's just going to, if you put them side by side, it allows you to look and say, yes, this is beautiful. Everything works well together. Or, oh, wait, this is not kind of working. This is clashing. Let's go back and figure this out. One of my favorite kind of like budget tricks is to go to a hardware store and start grabbing the paint swatches that are free and start laying them out. It's really going to like be awesome for you to see it, not on a screen, but in real life, what those colors are and what, if you want black and white, or if you want gray and blue or pink and greens. So that's one of my favorite little like side projects that a bride can do fun on a weekend.
That's a great recommendation. Seeing it in person really makes a huge difference.
Yep.
Can you talk a little bit about a wedding hashtag?
Yeah, I mean, this is just like, rose to fame recently, but, a hashtag obviously is something that is searchable through social media. And if sometimes couples get very creative and they either use their last name or something like that. And then everybody who may take a photo and upload it to social media, if they want to add that hashtag, it would allow everyone else who was at the event or later, maybe who wasn't at the event, to be able to see all of the photos that have that hashtag. I have a friend getting married soon, and we were just talking about her hashtag, and her new last name is going to be Snow, and she's going to maybe go with Snow in Love for her hashtag. Isn't that cute?
Oh, that's so cute. I love that. What a great way to kind of house everything in one place and everyone can see all the images and go back.
Yep.
Yeah, I love the beauty of social media. That's awesome. Let's talk a little bit about, we've got 3 minutes left, Maggie. I want to talk a little bit about dresses. So can you talk, let's start with a bustle. What's a bustle when it comes to your wedding gown?
Yeah, so a bustle is, when you think about the train of your wedding dress, right? And they can be all different lengths, and sometimes they're really long. They're like, cathedral and all these other lengths. A bustle is going to allow you to be able to bring it up, right? And it usually ties, or there's buttons that you can hook through. And of course, your stylist or your alterations department, especially here at David's, they can walk you through it. It allows you to bring your bustle, right, your train up. And so you can move more freely through, especially the reception. So think about for dancing and things like that. So it allows you to bring that train, especially if it's extra long, kind of brings it up, makes your dress a little bit more friendly for dancing.
I love it. How about the term silhouette when it comes to your gown?
Yeah, that is going to be the overall kind of look of the dress. There's different silhouettes. We know there's ball gown, and there's A-line, and there's mermaid, right? And there's fit and flare, and there's a bunch more. But the silhouette really is the shape of the dress, and they're all a little bit different. Sometimes there's a little difference between them, and other times there's large differences between a dress silhouette. But it's a good idea to kind of, one, go in with an open mind about silhouettes when you go dress shopping, right? I said you don't say you won't try on anything. But then also do a little bit of research and kind of know what silhouettes you kind of like feel like might work for your body type. So when you get in there and you have this sort of lingo back and forth with your stylist, when you're in store, you know what they're talking about, and you'll feel like it's a little bit easier for you to comprehend and understand.
That is excellent. How about like, we just got a question here about having kind of reception dress. Can you talk a little bit about the difference between maybe if you were to do an outfit change from your wedding gown to a reception dress?
Yeah, so the reception dress is you're going to change out of your ceremony dress, or the dress that you were just married in the ceremony, many times very large. And a lot of times brides will wear it through a little bit of the ceremony or the reception, and then they switch into their reception dress, which is usually for a little bit later on in the reception. Think mostly, dancing and kind of as the night goes on. A lot of times a bride will choose a shorter dress for a reception dress, right? A little bit more fun and free. I think if you have the budget for it, I think it's a great option. It also looks amazing when you're leaving and you're having one of those send-offs like we were talking about earlier. It's just kind of like, it gives you a little bit more freedom to move around. And I think it's a fun way to add in a little special twist to your
Who
day.
doesn't love an outfit change too?
I know, right?
Well, Maggie, we're just about at time, and I know honestly we could probably keep talking about this for another half hour. So many terms to explore and learn more about, but we're at time. So any final tips or tricks you can share with the group before we wrap up?
Yeah, so I think wedding vocabulary is really fun to talk about. Maybe we'll do a part 2, as to your point, like there's so many new terms that come up when it comes to wedding planning that you've never encountered before. But I think when you, like anything in life, if you have a question, stop and ask. Whether you're talking to a vendor or a venue, you don't want to later figure out something that they were charging you for something that you didn't know about because you didn't know a specific term. So there's a lot of new words when it comes to wedding planning. So make sure you just stop and ask. And definitely, stay tuned for our next Ask Maggie Live. And as you know, on David's Bridal, we have them weekly with our Ask Maggie takeovers.
Yeah, awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time, Maggie.
It was great to talk to you. I'll talk to you soon.
Take care.
Bye.